Welcome back to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Jackson Tolliver. We got a lot to go over today. We have a great interview today with NBC Sports Boston Patriots insider Phil Perry. He's going to run us through all of the rookies that the Patriots drafted this year and his thoughts and expectations for them. But for now, of course, as always, we got to get through these playoff series. Let's go over the Celtics first. We have one game to discuss, and to be honest, there's not much to talk about here. It was utter domination for the Celtics. Final score of 120-95. Celtics took care of business. 40 points in the first quarter. Cavaliers were able to hang in there, though. After the first, they scored 34. But then the Celtics were able to lock in. They won every single quarter. And this one, at the end of the day, wasn't too close. And to be honest, it's hard to see the Cavaliers being able to have any chance in this series, especially if Jarrett Allen doesn't come back. God, I made a video the other day. I made a clip from this podcast where I said, like, this might actually be a tough matchup if Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley play because of double bigs and no Porzingis, and I was just getting roasted, man. First of all, people in this video thought that I was a Cavs fan. I'm not a Cavs fan. I'm a Celtics fan. Second, people clearly didn't hear the part where I'm like, if Jarrett Allen plays, I'm talking about a double big lineup. There's no Jarrett Allen in this lineup. It's just Evan Mobley. Completely changes the complexion of their rebounding ability, of their rim protection ability. This is just a completely different situation. So anyway, I deleted that because I didn't want people to get the wrong idea. It's not that I can't take the heat. Maybe a little bit. I can't take the heat, you know. I want people to like me, man. You know, it's tough when everybody's flaming me for my take, but I don't think my take was fully understood. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get into this game. Shout out to Jaylen Brown and Derrick White. They were the two heroes of this one. Jaylen Brown, 12 for 18 from the field, 4 for 6 from 3 for 32 points, 6 rebounds, and a block. And just 1 turnover. That's pretty good for him. This is a remarkable game from him. I love how aggressive he's being. And his shot selection is clearly great. He's making 2/3 of his shots. He's making threes. He's driving to the rim. It just seems like he has eliminated the headache aspects of his game that we've seen from him in the past, especially in the playoffs in the past. I mean, we all remember Game 7 last year, the Eastern Conference Finals, when he just came out and just stunk up the whole court. I believe he had like 8 turnovers or something in that game. That was ridiculous. He has just cleaned up his game so much ever since he signed that extension. This has been his best season by far, and he has been so instrumental to this team's success. But another guy who is equally instrumental, I would say, to the team's success is Derrick White. 9 for 16. He had 7 threes in this one. 7 for 12. By far the most threes attempted and the most threes made on the team, or in the game, rather. Actually, Peyton attempted 10 threes. I didn't even realize that. But Derrick White has just been phenomenal. I've raved about him throughout this whole playoff run and even through the regular season, but especially during this playoff run. He has just taken a tremendous step forward. And it's so incredible to see because just a reminder, coming into the season, he wasn't even on ESPN's top 100 players ranking. And now he is probably the second best player so far, I would say, on a championship contender, on the championship favorite. He single-handedly led the Celtics past Miami in 2 of those games. He was a huge contributor in this game, and he's playing good defense, too. I mean, that's the other thing about Derrick White is that it's so easy to focus on his offensive game that it's hard to remember sometimes that he is a tremendous defender. He finished 8th in Defensive Player of the Year rankings. So this is just remarkable. I also got to give a shout out to Luke Kornet. Played 21 minutes. Obviously, there's been a big concern with Kristaps Porzingis being out of how would the bench unit respond to that. Kornet, obviously, we knew was going to have to soak up some minutes, and he did great. He grabbed 10 boards in 21 minutes. He had a plus 12, 2 blocks, 2 assists, only 4 points, but you know, who cares? He's not there to be a scorer. He's there to be a consistent, reliable defender and screen setter, and that's exactly what he's been. He just does his job, and he had a really good putback dunk that they called off. A couple nice baskets that they called off, actually, but I digress. Luke Kornet has been great, and Xavier Tillman also came in, and he was good. He got 3 rebounds in 7 minutes, 1 for 1 from the field with 2 points. 2 fouls, you can clean that up, but, you know, if Tillman has to see more minutes in this series for whatever reason, I could see him doing well too. I have a lot of faith in both of these backup bigs, and I think Brad Stevens is a genius for trading for Tillman. Obviously, you know, Kornet, I think Brad Stevens is a genius for holding on to Kornet and seeing potential when no one else did. I mean, I didn't think Kornet was going to be this serviceable of a backup big man, and he just is. He's doing great. Top to bottom, the Celtics are doing great with one somewhat exception. Let's talk about Jayson Tatum. Now, let me start off by saying, I don't think Jayson Tatum has had bad games in the playoffs. He just hasn't had as good of scoring games as he normally has. He leads the team in rebounding and assists, and he leads the entire NBA in plus minus through these playoffs so far. He just isn't scoring at the high level that we're used to seeing from him. He's not shooting abysmal. I mean, he's shooting he shot 7 for 19 from the field. That is pretty bad, especially for him. 0 for 5 from 3. That's miserable. But here's the thing with Jayson Tatum. Everyone is bogged down in, well, can they win without him? Without him scoring on a consistent basis. Does this matter? Should we be worried about Tatum? I don't care. I don't care if Jayson Tatum scores 10 points or 50 points. The only numbers I care about at the end of the day are the numbers at the bottom of the screen, next to Boston and next to Cleveland, or next to New York, or next to Minnesota, or whoever their next opponents are going to be. That's all I care about. I don't care if it comes from Derrick White, from Jaylen Brown, from Jayson Tatum, from freaking Drew Holiday or Al Horford. I don't care where that scoring production comes from. It just doesn't matter to me. So Jayson Tatum, I'm not going to bash him for not scoring 30 points a game because he's making the right reads. I mean, if you look at some of the screenshots that people have been passing around on Twitter, he's getting double teamed, triple teamed because he's Jayson Tatum, because he is a top 10 player in the NBA. And he's finally making the right reads. What do you guys want him to do in some of those situations? Just pull up and take shots in double coverage? No, because we've seen that happen before. And we get infuriated, and that's how the Celtics have lost playoff series before. He is maturing. He is growing up. He is learning that he's done so much in his individual career. First team All-NBA, multiple time All-NBA, multiple time All-Star. The one thing he hasn't done yet, besides MVP, which he'll probably never win, is win a ring. He has to win a ring. If Jayson Tatum wins a championship this year, so many of the noise of the haters, it just shuts them all up. And I don't care if he scores 6 points or 60 points. Like I already said, Jayson Tatum is finding a way to win. And that is what matters. That is why he's still such a top quality player. He's doing all the right things. He's making the right reads. Yes, in this game, his shooting percentage wasn't great. And it would have been nice if he maybe, didn't shoot 5 threes that were bricks. But again, I can't fault the guy for he's been the best rebounder on the team, even with Porzingis in the game. He has been the best rebounder. He's a great playmaker. He was tied for the most assists on the team with Derrick White for this game. He's had a triple-double already in these playoffs, his first ever. So I'm not going to fault this guy just because he's not averaging what he usually does in the playoffs, because it doesn't matter. The Celtics have blown out their opponent 5 times now. They had the one loss, which was frankly a dud. Miami had to go absolutely nuclear, franchise record from 3 for them to win. The Celtics have been blowing teams out. So if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I understand that the competition is going to be tougher when they get to New York or when they get to the finals, but this is working right now. Derrick White has the hot hand. He has the most threes made in the entire NBA in these playoffs so far. Jaylen Brown's got it going. Jayson Tatum doesn't have to have it going offensively for them to win. And we're seeing that. So I don't care about Jayson Tatum's lack of scoring production. And maybe in one game in the finals or a couple games in the finals, that's going to bite me in the butt, and he is going to shoot the team out of the game, and we're going to say, why can't you be what we know you can be? But for now, I can't complain because the Celtics are winning games. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. This was just a really remarkable performance. I mean, holding some of these guys like Max Strus at 2 for 8, 1 for 5. Donovan Mitchell, you held him to just under 50%. It seems like the strategy is, we know Donovan Mitchell's going to get his. Contain all the other guys. Darius Garland, contain him. He shot 6 for 15, 2 for 8 from 3. Evan Mobley, he got some buckets in the end that made his field goal percentage look a little bit better. But, I mean, Evan Mobley only was 17 points. Sam Merrill, 0 for 5 from the field, right? Like, you're just holding back their other guys. And Donovan Mitchell, we know, is going to score 30 a game. That's just what he does. So let him do his thing. Do your best to contain him. But I think the main emphasis for the Celtics defense is make sure the other guys can't get hot, because that's how the series with Orlando was actually competitive, because Donovan Mitchell, like, for example, in game 6 of that series, dropped 50 points. and they still lost because the rest of the team couldn't get anything going. So I think this is a great approach from the Celtics. I hope they keep this up. I think we're due for a heater game from Max Strus or like Sam Merrill, or if Dean Wade comes back, like we're due for some bizarro thing to happen. But again, for now, this is working. Jarrett Allen coming back, like I said, could change things, but we can't complain with this Celtics team right now. Maybe that'll change tonight. Maybe they'll drop the ball like they did in Game 2 against Miami, but I have high hopes that this series could end in 4 or 5. I really do believe it. So that's the Celtics. Let's move on to the Bruins. This team, they're just hot and they're cold, aren't they? I mean, Game 1 was remarkable. 5-1, the Bruins win. Firing on all cylinders. Brandon Carlo, who had just, his wife had delivered his new baby earlier in the day, flew out to Florida, played, scored a goal. It was remarkable. They were dominating the ice, dominating the puck. Their offensive zone time was great. They, I believe, did get outshot by Florida, but it doesn't matter because they have Jeremy Swayman in net, who, yet again, had a remarkable game. 38 saves for Jeremy Swayman. That is remarkable. So the debate between him and Ullmark is over. That's not even worth talking about. But again, this was a great showing from the Bruins. I think the problem here is that you're still not getting the production from your stars, and that came back to bite you in Game 2 because these guys like Geeky, Brazo, Lowry, Carlo, you can't expect those guys to be your main sources of offense, of scoring. So you still need to have, DeBrusk scored one, which was good. But you got to have Pastrnak getting more involved, Marchand, so on and so forth. This game was great, but it's tough to dwell on it for a long time because of last night's embarrassment. And this is what I mean when I say the team is so hot and cold. It was the same thing in the regular season. I feel like the Bruins couldn't hold on to momentum. All of a sudden, they would break out of bad momentum. They would break out of a slump and win a game, surprisingly. But I feel like this Bruins team struggles to win consistently. And we saw that in the last series where they lost 2 in a row after winning 2 in a row. It's like I just don't know what to expect with this team anymore. I said last episode, I think they'll beat the Panthers. I'm actually still going to stick with that, even after last night's embarrassment. I think they can bounce back in these 2 games at home, hopefully, and make it to the next series where I think they will eventually lose against New York. We're going to have 2 Boston-New York series, most likely, it looks like, between the Rangers-Bruins and the Knicks-Celtics. I think Celtics will win, Bruins will lose, so the 2 rival cities will split. But let's focus on here now because they have to get back to they have to get by the Panthers first, and if they keep playing like this, it's not going to be pretty. The second and third period were just miserable. First period, they should have capitalized on some more goals. I believe it was Beecher who missed really a gimme off a great breakaway. I forget who gave him the pass, but he couldn't slot it home. And I felt like after the first period, it should have been 3-4-0 based on the momentum and the opportunities that the Bruins had. And the Panthers capitalized on it and came back, rattled off 6 goals. And that was that. So I don't know what to expect for the rest of this series. I don't know what version of the Bruins we're going to see because there's 2 different ones, and they're drastically different. I feel like the Bruins are either really good or really bad. And most of the time in the last series, it stems from the offense being really good or really bad. But this series, it's the defense so far. They were great in the first game. They were poor in this one. And, of course, the offense as well. You're only scoring 1 goal. And the offense went radio silent in the second and third period. But this is just like a whole team bad performance. The whole team was great Game 1, and the whole team was bad Game 2. Besides Swayman, I mean, I just feel like they're, like, even though Swayman let in 6 goals, it's more on the defense than him, I thought. I mean, this defense was just atrocious. The one highlight I thought from this game was when Pastrnak and Tkachuk started fighting late in the third. That was a pretty good fight. But most of the viewers had tuned out by then because it was just looking so grim for Boston. So this was a very unfortunate result. That goes without saying. I need more from Pastrnak. It's like, why can't Montgomery just call him out after every game that he doesn't do well in? Because that clearly worked for him in Game 7 when he scored the winner. We need more from Pasta. We need more from Marchand. We need more from the guys. Charlie Coyle was the one who scored yesterday, finally. It's his first goal in this playoffs. He was due. But we need more from the guys that we're supposed to be getting more from. Next game is tomorrow night back at the Garden. Finally, I will take the Bruins to win this one, regain the lead of this series. Fans better be in full force there on Causeway Street. I'll take a final score of 2-1. I think Swayman's going to come up with some heroics yet again. Offense isn't going to look that great, but they're going to scrape it out. Maybe 3-1. They'll get an empty netter at the end. All right, let's get right into this interview with Phil Perry. We're going to talk about the Patriots. I haven't talked about the Patriots on this pod in a long time because there hasn't really been that many developments, but thanks so much to Phil for doing this. Here it is. All right, I'm in here today with Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston. You've seen him on your TV. We're going to run through some Patriots talk, some Patriots rookie talk. Phil, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Coming at you live from the wilderness in
it looks like
greater
you're on
Boston area.
You're on like a hike.
I am on a hiking trail. I'm sitting at a picnic bench. I'm waiting to pick up my 7-year-old son from school. So this is perfect. I'm glad we're able to do this.
Yeah. Perfect timing. All right, so let's just get right into it. Let's start off with Drake Maye. I want to go through the main rookies of this class that we're really going to be looking at. Starting off with Drake Maye, my first question to you is a simple one. If you had your pick between Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels, would you have selected Drake Maye? Are you happy that the Patriots ended up with Drake Maye?
Would have taken Drake Maye 1 overall, believe it or not, Jackson.
Above
I've
Caleb.
been saying
above Caleb.
Above Caleb Williams. I've been saying that for a while now. I feel as though, number one, you look at the ceiling, what he's able to do physically already as a 21-year-old guy who hasn't played a ton of football. He's one of these guys who lost the high school season to COVID. He's a 3-sport athlete, so he wasn't one of these 7-on-7 camp guys and these football 12 months out of the year kinds of players, which you see more and more of, and that's fine. Those guys are very finely tuned by the time they get to the college ranks and then the pro game. But I think that just is an indicator, because Maye is still very good, despite those things, that his ceiling is sky high. And to compete in the NFL, in today's NFL, especially in the AFC, you need guys who can do some of the things he can do, which is be a good athlete, escape from pressure, make just about every throw there is to make on the field, off platform, shaky footing. He can do all that stuff already. And I think he's underrated in terms of what he's able to do from a mental standpoint. They ran a pretty simplistic offense there at UNC, but you can see he understands protections. He knows when to drift away from free rushers. I don't think he had the number of answers that he will have at the pro level from the coaching that he'll get in New England, in terms of, okay, when we see this look, this is going to be how we respond. This is how our receivers are going to alter their routes in order to help you out. That didn't really exist, is my understanding, at North Carolina. So I think you're just going to see this guy. He's second youngest quarterback of the first round quarterbacks taken, behind only J.J. McCarthy. The sky's the limit for him. And the reason I would go with him over the other two, just very briefly, Daniel's frame does scare me, especially with his playing style. His playing style is very binary. He is throwing from the pocket or he is running. And when you play that way, especially when you're going to a bad team, which he is, it's a better situation than New England's, but his offensive line there in Washington is not very good. And I worry about his health. And I would worry about his health moving forward. Caleb Williams can do just about anything physically, and he is. I'm not worried about him because he's like a little mini tank out there. He doesn't have that size that Drake Maye has. So, does he see things, especially over the middle of the field, as clearly as Drake Maye will? I don't know. But I think makeup is such a key part of playing that position. And I have enough questions about Caleb Williams' makeup. And I know the Bears have questions about his makeup too. I haven't spoken to people there. But the talent is so great, so you take the gamble on it anyway. I'm not saying that, Caleb, I would never touch Caleb Williams. He's not a first-round pick or anything like that. I like what I've learned about Drake Maye in that regard more than Caleb Williams. And I think physically, give him a couple years, he might not be all that different than Caleb Williams.
Wow. So you would give him a high chance of being the best quarterback out of this draft?
Eventually, right? It's going to take some time, especially because the situation in New England is a bleep storm,
right?
To put it kindly. Caleb Williams is going into a much better situation. JJ McCarthy is going into a much better situation. Wouldn't shock me. JJ McCarthy has better numbers than Drake Maye, over the course of their first, call it 8 games of their rookie careers. Whenever that happens,
right,
it might be weeks 1 through 8 for JJ. It might be weeks 8 through 17 for Drake Maye. But but I could certainly see statistically other quarterbacks doing better than Drake Maye. But if you surround him the right way, 2-3 years from now, I would not be stunned at all if he was the best quarterback in this class.
On the topic of starting, you mentioned that it might be, weeks 8 through 17. When would you like to see him realistically start? Obviously, there's, factors like injuries to Jacoby Brissett. Barring anything like that, if everything goes to plan, when would you expect and when would you like to see him take over that starting role?
I think it all depends on how it looks around him, quite frankly. I shouldn't say that. It doesn't all depend on that, but I think that's such a major factor. There are still significance to me at both left tackle and left guard. I think the rest of the line, you're pretty much set. David Andrews at center, Sidney So at right guard, Mike Owenu at right tackle. But if you have, 40% of your line that is a question mark, that's no situation to put a rookie into, in my opinion. Even though he is pretty athletic and he'll be able to avoid some of that pressure, maybe even better than Jacoby Brissett will be able to. But that to me is number one, what I'm looking at. And we've been able to tell Jackson in years past when the protection is bad and when they have no chemistry and the communication stinks, you can tell early, even in training camp when quarterbacks aren't allowed to be hit, we can tell. And so if you can see that in the summer, that's a no-go for me. I'm not even thinking about getting him out there until you feel like you can get some sort of consistency from your offensive line. Otherwise, there are things, if he's just not picking up the playbook, again, it's going to be a significantly different offense for him. Going to a Shanahan tree sort of scheme from what was an air raidy kind of offense at North Carolina, really the last 2 years, but especially this last year when just talking to coaches who have studied that offense closely because they were studying Drake Maye closely, it was essentially a quote unquote run to grass sort of situation for the receivers there. And while that allows for some freedom for the quarterback, which I think can be good, it really is not a precise offense. And so there is not the thing that we used to hear with Tom Brady all the time. Okay, if you're supposed to be running an 8-yard out, you better be at 8 yards exactly when Tom Brady expects you to be there. That didn't exist in North Carolina. So it's going to be more precise at the next level. And if he's just not picking that up, then you've got to wait. You've got to be patient. I think the worst thing they could do is rush him out there, Jackson, because if you feel eventually you got to take him out, whether it's because he's not ready or because the situation around him isn't ready, then I think you could talk about doing some real damage to any young player's psyche. So once he's in there, you've got to feel comfortable keeping him in there. So if that means waiting 8 weeks, if it means waiting a whole season, I think Patriots fans should be okay with that because they are not contending for anything this year. And this guy's development, this one player's development, is the one thing that matters even more than wins and losses right now.
Yeah, let's stick with the offensive line before we go to the fun part, which is wide receivers. Do you think any of these guys have starting potential? Caden Wallace, maybe, that they picked. I don't think that, I think they wanted to trade up, correct, for one of those earlier guys. I like some of those earlier. I like Sua Matia. I like some of those earlier guys that they were looking at. Do you think that any of these guys have starter potential?
Well, they were looking to trade up for a receiver. The offensive line, what Elliot Wolf will tell you is that the board fell the way that they were okay with it falling.
Really?
They liked Caden Wallace at that number 68 overall pick. Though somebody like Sua Mataia went to Kansas City right bottom of the second round. He was somebody who they had in for a top 30 visit, had a whole season of left tackle experience, which Caden Wallace does not have. There are players who have done what Caden Wallace they're hoping will do at the next level, which is play your entire career at right tackle and then make the move effectively to left tackle. The best example of it is Tyron Smith, formerly the Cowboys, now of the Jets.
I wanted the Patriots to get him.
It might not have been a bad idea, even just for a year or two. I know he's closer to the end than the beginning, but man, they still have a real question there. Is Caden Wallace going to be Tyron Smith? I doubt it. I don't see him being that kind of athlete. Another example would be, Tristan Wirfs played mostly right tackle at Iowa and then played right tackle really the first few years of his career at Tampa Bay. Last year shifts to left tackle. He's a great left tackle. Is Caden Wallace on the level of these guys athletically? He's not. If he was, he'd be taken in the first round, not the third, which both of those guys were. So I find it a bit dubious that they are going to be able to find their left tackle as a guy who played 40 starts at right tackle at Penn State. I know Olu Fashanu, great left tackle prospect, first round guy that, maybe that's the only reason why Caden Wallace wasn't given a shot to play left tackle. I just think it's going to be difficult for him to make that switch. So to me, that's going to be a question all year, Jackson. We had Brian Hoyer with us on draft weekend, and he was talking about, hey, if they don't have a left tackle, they're not getting one in the first round. You might just have to be comfortable putting somebody over there and helping them a lot. You can chip with backs. You can help with tight ends. You can slide protections. The receiver help was what Hoyer wanted more than offensive line help, actually, which I found interesting because he says, look, receivers, you got to hope those guys can just win in a one-on-one situation on third down. Tackle, you can help them on third down. You can't do that with a receiver when he just needs to get open and catch the football. So I think that's what the Patriots are hoping they'll be able to do. Whoever's there at left tackle, whether it's Wallace, Chuk Sakorfor, they'll just be able to give that guy enough help that they can get by.
Yeah, and then maybe next year go for a left tackle in the first round. You never know.
Right.
It just adds it adds something that you have to worry about, another layer, which is just, this team already has so many holes on offense that you have to worry about, so it's concerning, to say the least. But let's move on to the wide receivers, as you mentioned. Ja'Lynn Polk, now, this one I know they wanted to trade up. What do you see in Ja'Lynn Polk? Do you think he has potential to start long-term for this team?
I do, yeah. Starter for sure. I think he could be a solid number 2 receiver for the next 10 years. I think he's that good. He is not a freaky athlete, but he knows how to play. He's competitive. He's got good enough size, and he's a good enough athlete. I think he's been almost a little bit underrated for his athleticism since he was drafted. I know he ran 4.5 in the 40, but had a better vertical than Roma Dunze, who's a great athlete, his teammate at Washington. So there's some explosiveness there. Big hands, vice grip hands, contested catch situations, do the dirty work over the middle, those tight window throws that really every quarterback has to make. It's rare, the offense that is scheming guys wide ass open all the time. Kyle Shanahan can do it. Sean McVay can do it. It's not common, though. And so you have to have guys who can win in those tightly contested spots. And I think he can do that. I don't think he's a game breaker. I think that's sort of what they need eventually. They could use one right now. They just didn't have the option to really go up and get one. I know Xavier Legette was really within trade up range, and they tried to move up to get him. Will they regret not maybe being willing to give up a little bit more to move up and get him? They might at some point in time here, because I think he has a chance to be a true number 1, whereas Polk probably always going to be a complimentary guy. But they should get good production out of him. And I think relatively soon. I think that's the one benefit to drafting Polk is he's not a long distance projection kind of player. You know what he is. He's ready to go. You could start him tomorrow and he'd be a competent receiver for you. This is not Tyquan Thornton, taking a big swing in the second round and hoping that you have, a taller version of Tyreek Hill. Like, that's just not who he is. But he's not the big swing for the home run. He's a double, though. I think that's what he can be. And I think there's real value in that. Again, they still need, to me, Jackson, they need a number 1. They need a left tackle. They needed a quarterback. They really were able to check one of those boxes during this draft and getting Drake Maye. The other two, you're going to have to address, whether it's via trade or next year's draft in the near future here.
Javon Baker, could he be a 1 down the road? Maybe. Fingers crossed.
I think there's the potential for that. I think he's got a better shot at that in some ways than Polk does, just because his game is he plays a little bit faster. He's more of that boundary jump ball threat that we've seen, whether it's Dez Bryant is a really lofty comp, but that's who I think he, in a perfect world would end up being. He's not somebody's going to run by you. He's not necessarily going to even threaten a safety on a consistent basis and get that guy out of the box and have to play the deep half of the field over the top of you because your corner just can't stay with him. That's not Javon Baker. But third down, red zone, jump ball situations, he's got great body control. I think he's got good hands. He's able to make some really outstanding acrobatic catches. I thought Steve Smith, former Panthers and Ravens receiver, made a great comp for Baker. When he watched Baker, he used Brandon Lloyd. I don't know if you remember Brandon Lloyd, but was with the Patriots back in 2012 and made all kinds of spectacular catches for them. I think he had an 800-yard or thereabouts sort of season with Tom Brady that year. And before that, had a long career with the Niners, and that was sort of his game. He was going to play along the boundary, but he wasn't going to run by you. He was gonna make every back shoulder catch. He was gonna reel in one-handed fades down the sideline. Like that might be the kind of thing you could see from Baker if it ends up panning out. But he's a 4th-round pick. So, what are the odds he gets to what is the range of outcomes for Javon Baker? You might be hoping for some, pie in the sky sort of stuff if you're thinking he's going to be a number 1, but I think that is somewhere on that range. It's somewhere on that spectrum for him.
If nothing else, he's got a great personality for sure.
No doubt.
Before we wrap up here, I want to stick on the topic of wide receivers. Who do you think, because obviously there's so many wide receivers now on the roster, and they have to trim some of them. Who do you think that might be that has to go?
So I did a 53-man roster projection recently, and the 5 receivers I had on the roster were the 2 rookies, Polk and Baker, Pop Douglas, KJ Osborne, and Kendrick Bourne. That was it. So that meant no Juju Smith-Schuster. It meant no Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Reagor. They've got a whole mess of receivers in that room right now. I'm sure, 3 or 4 of them, your listeners, Jack's probably never even heard of before. But that is to me the group of 5 that I find most dependable. Now, does Juju Smith-Schuster, because of the money he's making, somehow find a way onto the active roster? Potentially, I guess. I don't see how he gets on the field. One of the nice things about this Elliott Wolf, Packers-inspired regime is we're draft and developed, right? How many times have we heard them say that over the course of the last few months? Well, that means develop by getting them on the field, and young guys play. And so if you have Juju Smith-Schuster sitting there, I don't care what he's making or what your dead money cap hit is if you have to release him. If he is stunting the growth of somebody like Ja'Lynn Polk, because, well, he needs to be our big-bodied slot, and that he's going to get all those important reps. He's going to be out there for every 3rd down. And all of a sudden, your 2nd-round picks on the bench. How does that help you? How does it help you develop? That's part of your philosophy, and you're not executing it. You're not seeing that through. So, to me, they've got so much money to play with still. All that money that they were planning on spending on Calvin Ridley is still sitting there. That's the kind of cut your losses kind of move that I think you should feel okay making. Is it's addition by subtraction. We're going to be better off. Our young players are going to be better off by not having this guy in the room, taking valuable reps in practices, in games. Tyquan Thornton, same thing. Unfortunately for him, he goes through a few different offenses first couple years in the league, but man, he's just been so inconsistent in his ability to catch the football, be in the right place at the right time. I'm not sure why you would continue to invest in that. This is this regime's opportunity to make it their own. And so look at mistakes that were made in the past. And if you view them as mistakes, don't keep investing time, money, energy, effort into making those mistakes right. They're not yours. It's okay to move on and find what's next. And I think that's really important that they do that at that receiver position. Maybe one or 2 of those guys end up, again, like I said, sneaking on, if Kendrick Bourne isn't truly ready because he has to start the year on PUP coming off a knee injury. Okay, does Tyquan Thornton make it then? Does Juju make it then? Maybe. But I think the 5 that I mentioned are going to ultimately be the 5 that they are relying on by the time they get to the end of the season.
It's got to be those 5. All right, in my mind, those 5s are locks because you got the 2 rookies. You got Pop Douglas, who's the guy right now. KJ Osborne, you just signed, and I think he has a lot of upside as a 3, maybe. And Bourne, you can't get rid of Bourne. So yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I think Belichick's one of his worst moves was the essentially exchanging Jacoby Myers for Juju. I don't know why he did that, and it still haunts us. I wish we still had Jacoby on the roster. Well, Phil, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Jackson, thanks for having me, bud. Say hi to my friend Gary for me. Love that guy.
Will do. All right. Thanks so much to Phil Perry for doing that. That was an awesome interview. Now, before we wrap things up today, we should touch on the Red Sox and the New England Revolution. Starting off with the Red Sox, 2 games to talk about, both losses to the Atlanta Braves. Yeah, I kind of expected this. I was hoping they'd be able to split, but, didn't quite work out. I mean, realistically what these 2 games show is that the Red Sox still have a long way to go before they are to be considered true title contenders, and I think we all knew that. Dealing with some pretty significant injuries in Trevor Story and Tristan Casas, 2 of their best players. Story's not going to be available for the rest of the year. Casas should be back eventually. These games, Atlanta is just so far ahead of where Boston is, and it was brutal to see Chris Sale on the mound throwing 10 strikeouts. That was That was a killer. I mean, he is such a good pitcher. It is just so brutal and painful that he was never able to really stay healthy for the Red Sox, especially in recent years. It just didn't work out, and it's unfortunate. He had some great times here, but in the last few years, it hasn't been good, and I think letting him go made sense. But it was brutal to see him torching up the Red Sox like that. I think that a lot of these young guys, they don't really have the ability to battle back from a deficit as a team when things aren't working with the pitching. And, to be fair, the pitching has looked great so far this season. I think it's tough for them to win games. And when you're against a team like Atlanta, who just has so much offensive talent, it's tough to win, especially in Atlanta. That's also not going to help you out. It was Nick Pivetta coming back yesterday. Good to see him coming back. Let me get his exact stats pulled up. 7 hits, 5 earned runs. It was all him. Definitely wasn't a great showing, but it's good to see him back. I believe in Nick Pivetta. He had a pretty good start to the season, so hopefully he can improve that. The relievers did good. Didn't give up any runs after Nick Pivetta's 5, so it just sucks that the offense wasn't able to help him out. I mean, not much I'm going to say about this. It is what it is, and you move on to the next. They got the night off tonight, and then they go to Washington. Or no, they're back home against Washington for a 3-game series. And they got the Rays for a 3-game series. So hopefully they can come out with results in both of those series. I think the Red Sox are superior to both the Nationals and the Rays, especially the Rays. That would be good to get a cushion in the division over them. But yeah, kind of expected against the Braves. Not going to harp on it too much. Let's move on to the Revs, who are facing the New York Red Bulls this Saturday night. The Revs aren't going to win this. Let's be honest. They're in New York. The Red Bulls look really good this year. I would be dumbfounded if the Revolution could pull this off. I mean, okay, I shouldn't say dumbfounded, because at the end of the day, the Red Bulls only have 2 more wins than the Revolution. It's just they've been able to salvage more draws. I believe I said this last episode. Like, New England has 7 losses, they have 2. But then they have 4 wins, and New England has 2. It's just they've been able to get more draws than losses, and the Revs have struggled mightily this season, as we know. But this is a good, opportunity for them to prove that season's not over. They can still make a push. I mean, obviously the season's not over. They can always make a push. They just have to start doing it now. Last week in Chicago was a great result, obviously. You want to build off that momentum. Shonkalai is hot right now. Scored now in 2 straight games. Hopefully we can see him get involved. Carles Hill, I'll look for him to have a big game. He's been kind of silent recently, so, we're always looking for him to have a bounce-back performance. I don't know who they're going to start in net, whether it's Ivacic or Vaclik, one of the Eastern European goalies that they have at their disposal. I don't know which one it's going to be. Hopefully Vrioni doesn't start. Sorry, I still don't like Vrioni that much. And the defense is also, I don't know who they're going to start. And midfield, that's the thing with this team. I just feel like there's so many rotating pieces because you have Barrero coming back into the fold from injury. I feel like the lineup changes every week. If we can get a more consistent lineup from Porter, I think that would, kind of lock in some more consistency. And it's also tough because the Revs have dealt with a lot of injuries, both the ones that have stemmed over this year from last season and the ones that have, popped up during the season so far between, Nacho Hill has been out, is going to be out for another 3 weeks or so. So you've had some injuries pop up here and there. So I hope they continue to get some consistency, get some reps together, and that will hopefully improve the overall performance of the team. That's all I'm going to say about that. We got more important things to deal with right now, to be honest. Celtics and Bruins. Those are the keys. I got the Celtics winning tonight. I don't know if I actually mentioned that when I was talking about the Celtics. Celtics are going to win tonight by 20, especially if Jared Allen doesn't play. And the Bruins, I think, actually win tomorrow as well. Let's go Celtics. Let's go Bruins. Let's go Red Sox. Let's go Revs. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to Tutter Talk. My name is Jackson Tolliver. I'll see you on... Oh, no, I won't. Hold on. Hold the outro as I'm holding this floss in my hand. If you're watching on camera, I'm graduating on Sunday, so I will not be recording. You might see me on Monday if I have time. I'm also starting a new job over at CLNS Media as a producer there, so I might be doing some of that, but I might be back on Monday, not Sunday. Anyway, as always, I'm Jackson Tolliver. I will see you when I see you. We'll say that today. Peace out.